How far are we willing to go? How far am I willing to go for the truth? I think some people only go as far as the answer that they want to hear, while others will stop at nothing to find absolute truth, even if it's not what they want to hear. And there are many stories of long voyages and great hardships endured by greedy people in search of treasure, and they often risk life and limb to find it. One of my favorites, it just fascinates me, probably because we like camping in the Rocky Mountains, but several years ago there was a millionaire named Forrest Fenn, and he hid a treasure somewhere in the Rockies, and he only gave a few clues out to the world, and it was up for anybody to find. And many people searched for years and years to find this treasure. I read of even one person who died in an attempt to find this treasure. And what's interesting is they had no idea what exactly was in this treasure chest, but they risked a great deal to find it. But here we read of a queen who did the opposite. She actually brought treasure, but sought something she found far more precious than treasure. She sought wisdom. She made a sacrifice for something that she deemed far more valuable. She had heard of Solomon's words and his wisdom, and she came to prove him or test him and essentially see for herself if what she had heard was true. And then, if it was, to ask him questions. She didn't come looking for money. She didn't come looking for a trade partner or anything material. She came looking for answers. She came looking for wisdom. Perhaps the highest compliment was when Jesus spoke of her in Matthew chapter 12 and verse 42, and he drew some lessons from what she did. There in Matthew chapter 12 and verse 42, it says, "The queen of the south will rise up with this generation at the judgment and will condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon." She traveled to Jerusalem to get a closer look at his world-renowned, God-given wisdom. And the king answers to her questions, the splendor of the temple that she saw, and the impressive display of all the royal proceedings and everything that she saw really just left her speechless. She said to Solomon, "The report was true that I heard in my own lands of your word and your wisdom, and behold, the half was not told to me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpassed the report that I heard." Jesus uses this queen's example to expose really the utter folly of the Jews who had Jesus right in front of them and really was dismissive of him, compared to this woman who went to great lengths to see someone actually less than Jesus, to see Solomon. The Jews of that age wouldn't listen to the wisdom of one much greater than Solomon, even though he was right there standing in front of them. And so he uses her as a great example and what they were ultimately not willing to do. Well, she responded with appropriate interest to the fame and the reputation of King Solomon. Reports of his wisdom and his great accomplishments had reached even her kingdom many miles away, and what she heard made her eager to hear more. I think it begs the question, for me anyway, how far are we willing to go? How far am I willing to go for the truth today? I think some people only go as far as the answer that they want to hear, while others will stop at nothing to find absolute truth, even if it's not what they want to hear. Solomon's fame had spread far and wide, and I'm sure many came from all over to seek an audience with him and ask him a question. But who was he? Who was Solomon? I think we're all fairly familiar with him, but I'll just go over some brief highlights for a moment. He was, of course, the son of David and the third king of Israel. And like David, Solomon reigned for 40 years and was known for a great many things, but I think his wisdom was certainly the most noted, and this came directly from God. 2 Chronicles chapter 1, verses 7 through 12 details this great conversation between God and Solomon. It says there, beginning in 2 Chronicles chapter 1 and verse 7, "In that night God appeared to Solomon and said to him, 'Ask what I shall give you.' And Solomon said to God, 'You have dealt with my father David with great loving kindness, and have made me king in his place. Now, O Lord God, your promise to my father David is fulfilled, and you have made me king over a people as numerous as the dust of the earth. Give me now wisdom and knowledge, that I may go out and come in before this people. For who can rule this great people of yours?" And God said to Solomon, "Because you had this in mind and did not ask for riches, wealth, or honor, or the life of those who hate you, nor have you even asked for a long life, but you have asked for yourself wisdom and knowledge, that you may rule my people over whom I made you king. Wisdom and knowledge have been granted to you. And I will give you riches and wealth and honor, such as none of the kings who are before you has possessed, nor those who will come after you." In time, Solomon's great wisdom would become known and well known throughout the world. And as his reputation grew, great rulers wanted to seek an audience with him, including the Queen of Sheba. 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verses 22 and 23, "So King Solomon became greater than all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom, and all the kings of the earth were seeking the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart." Perhaps the best known story of Solomon's wisdom in action involved the two women who had infant sons. In 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 16, I think we know the story fairly well. One of the sons died, and his mother took the son of the other woman and claimed him as her own. And they brought this argument to King Solomon to resolve. Well, how could he possibly know just by looking at whose this son was? There weren't DNA tests or anything like that. He couldn't just by looking or even hearing the arguments. They were both pretty convincing. So he said, beginning in verse 24, "The king said, 'Get me a sword.' So they brought a sword before the king. The king said, 'Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other.' Then the woman whose child was the living one spoke to the king, for she was deeply stirred over her son, and said, 'O my lord, give her the living child, and by no means kill him.' But the other said, 'He shall neither be neither mine nor yours. Divide him.' Then the king says, 'Give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him. She is his mother.' When all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had handed down, they feared the king, for they saw the wisdom that God was in him to administer justice." Solomon was on really just another level as he looked at and addressed situations and problems such as this. You know, these were in the days long before Jerry Springer and maternity tests and "you are not the mother," none of that drama. But he found the perfect solution to this problem, and one I never would have thought of. And I'm sure there were many stories and many examples that demonstrated his exceptional wisdom. Well, in addition to this, Solomon had wealth that, really we can't wrap our heads around. There's never been anyone else in human history who had so much wealth literally at their fingertips. Not even Scrooge McDuck. He had nothing to hold on Solomon. Gold was as common as pebbles. Some have estimated his net worth at over $2 trillion. And to put that in perspective, if I did the math right, Jeff Bezos is about the richest person at $250 billion. That's just 12% of what Solomon had. I don't think there was any possession he didn't have or couldn't easily obtain. And I feel really bad for Solomon's friends on his birthday. They're all like, what are we going to get this guy? He's got everything there is. Solomon also built the first Jewish temple, and he was a man of rest compared to his father David, who was a man of war. And so God allowed him to build this temple. But in addition to wisdom and riches, Solomon was also well known for his many wives and concubines, and of course we know that as well. God never approved of that activity. He's always deemed marriage between one man and one woman, but he suffered Solomon. Not quite sure how he kept up with so many anniversary dates. I can't remember one, but I guess he had plenty of people for that kind of thing. He also offered several books in the Old Testament, but I would say that his most thoughtful words probably came from Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. He said there, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all." Toward the end of his life, he realized that none of his superior wisdom, none of his possessions, none of his accomplishments in this life really didn't mean anything if he didn't have proper fear and obedience to God. And the same is true today. What a lesson for us today. Solomon here gives us the final and authoritative conclusion of his thorough and vast and extensive search for really the question, or the answer to the question, why are we here? Fear God, keep His commandments. Solomon had everything, but we're quickly reminded of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 16 and verse 26. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Solomon certainly had everything he could ever want, but what's it worth in the end?